The jewelry box felt heavier in my hands than it should have. 3 months of overtime at the construction site, skipping lunches, saving every dollar I could scrape together, all for this moment, all for her smile. "Happy birthday, Denise," I said, holding out the small velvet box to my wife of 4 years. She looked beautiful in the soft glow of the patio lights we'd strung around our backyard. Her dark hair caught the breeze, and for a second she looked exactly like the woman I'd fallen in love with. Before the late-night phone calls, before the secretive texting, before she started treating our marriage like an inconvenience. "Oh, Joel," she breathed, opening the box. Inside sat the vintage pearl necklace she'd been admiring in that antique shop downtown for months. Her eyes widened, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. I'd gotten it right. She kissed my cheek, soft and quick, then leaned close to my ear. "Don't get jealous, okay? You should leave for a bit. My ex showed up. I don't want drama." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Leave? Leave my own wife's birthday party? The party I'd helped plan in our own backyard with our friends and family? "What?" I whispered back, certain I'd misheard. "Brandon's here," she said, her voice still sweet but firm. "I didn't invite him, but Stacy did. You know how he gets when you're around. Just give me an hour to handle this, okay? Please?" Around us, 25 people laughed and chatted, completely unaware that my world was tilting sideways. My buddy Frank from work raised his beer bottle in my direction, grinning. Mrs. Peterson from next door was complimenting the decorations I'd hung yesterday. Everyone was having a perfect time at the perfect party I'd thrown for my wife, who was now asking me to leave so she could spend time with her ex-boyfriend. "You want me to leave our house?" I said slowly, "so you can hang out with Brandon?" "It's not like that," Denise said, but her eyes darted away. "I just don't want any weirdness tonight. You know how you two are together." "How we were together?" The last time I'd seen Brandon Mays, he'd been hitting on my wife at a barbecue while I was standing right there. When I'd called him out, Denise had spent the entire ride home telling me I was being paranoid and jealous. "This is my house," I said quietly. "Joel, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at her face, searching for some sign of the woman who used to defend me, who used to choose me. Instead, I saw impatience, annoyance, like I was the problem here. "Fine," I said. "I'll go grab some more beer from the store." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you. You're the best." She squeezed my hand and melted back into the crowd, the pearl necklace already around her throat. I watched her navigate through our friends, smiling and laughing, playing the perfect hostess, playing the perfect wife. I didn't go to the store. Instead, I walked around to the side of the house and stood in the shadows between our property and the Petersons. From there, I could see through our kitchen window and the open back door into the living room where most of the party had moved. It took exactly 12 minutes. 12 minutes for Brandon to find her. 12 minutes for them to drift to the quiet corner by the bookshelf away from the main crowd. 12 minutes for my marriage to officially end. I watched my wife laugh into Brandon's chest, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. I watched him cup her face with both hands, thumb stroking her cheek. I watched them kiss, slow and familiar and devastating. The pearl necklace I'd bought her caught the light as she tilted her head back, letting him deepen the kiss. Around them, the party continued. Our friends, our family, all of them talking and laughing while my wife made out with another man 15 feet away. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my ribs. 4 years of marriage. 4 years of believing her when she said Brandon was just a friend, just someone she'd dated briefly in college, just a harmless part of her past. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos. The angle was perfect. You could see both their faces clearly, see the intimacy in their body language, see the wedding ring on her finger as her hand rested on his chest. Then I walked back inside. The music seemed louder as I crossed the threshold. Conversations felt too bright, too normal. Frank appeared at my elbow with a fresh beer. "There you are, man. Where'd you disappear to?" "Just needed some air," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Across the room, Denise and Brandon had separated, but barely. They stood close together, her fingers still touching his arm, both of them flushed and smiling. She saw me looking, and her expression shifted, guilt flashing across her features before she covered it with a bright smile. "Joel!" she called out, waving me over. "Come say hi to Brandon. He was just telling me about his new business." "New business?" "Right. Last I'd heard, Brandon was between jobs, living in his buddy's basement and calling himself an entrepreneur because he sold protein powder on Instagram." I walked over slowly, feeling like I was moving through water. Every step felt deliberate, final. "Hey, Joel," Brandon said, extending his hand like we were old friends, like he hadn't just been kissing my wife. Great party, man. Denise always did know how to throw a celebration. I looked at his hand for a long moment, then at his face. He was handsome in that obvious way, tall, broad shoulders, perfect teeth. The kind of guy who probably peaked in high school and spent his 30s trying to recapture that glory. "Brandon," I said, not taking his hand. "Funny seeing you here. I don't remember Denise mentioning you were coming." "Oh, Stacy invited me," he said quickly. "Last-minute thing. Hope that's cool." Stacy, Denise's best friend since college, the one who'd never liked me, who always made comments about how Denise could do better. Of course she'd invited him. "Actually," I said, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause, "I think there's something you should know." Denise's eyes went wide. "Joel, don't—" "We're still married," I continued, looking directly at Brandon. "Denise and I. Happily married, in fact. Or at least, I thought we were until about 5 minutes ago." The color drained from Brandon's face. Around us, I could feel people turning, sensing drama. Frank moved closer, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Wait, what?" Brandon said, looking between me and Denise. "You told me you guys were separated. You said you were getting divorced." "Did she now?" I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. "Is this what separated people do?" I showed him the pictures I'd just taken. Brandon stared at the screen, his jaw working soundlessly. In the photos, there was no mistaking what was happening, no way to spin it as innocent or friendly. "You told me he moved out," Brandon said to Denise, his voice rising. "You said he was living with his brother." "I never said that," Denise protested, but her voice was weak. "You absolutely said that. 3 weeks ago at Murphy's bar. You said you were finally free." The party had gone quiet now. 25 people stood frozen, drinks in hand, watching my marriage implode in real time. Someone had turned down the music. In the sudden silence, every word carried. "Joel," Denise said, tears starting to form. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked. "Explain how you told me to leave my own house so you could make out with your ex? Explain how you've been lying to both of us? Or explain how you're wearing the necklace I bought you while you're cheating on me?" Her hand flew to her throat, touching the pearls like she'd forgotten they were there. "I think I should go," Brandon said quietly. "Yeah," I said, not taking my eyes off my wife. "I think you should." But he didn't move. None of us moved. We stood there in the wreckage of the evening, surrounded by the detritus of a party that had died a sudden, ugly death. Frank stepped closer to me. "You okay, brother?" I looked around the room at the faces of our friends and family. Some looked shocked, others uncomfortable. A few, like Mrs. Peterson, looked almost eager, like they were witnessing the best gossip of the year. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silence, "I'm better than I've been in months, because now I know exactly where I stand." I turned to face the room, addressing everyone at once. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my wife's birthday. Unfortunately, the party's over. Denise has other plans for the evening." "Joel, please," Denise whispered, grabbing my arm. "Don't do this. Not here." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face. "You already did this, Denise. I'm just making sure everyone knows." I gently removed her hand and walked toward the back door. "Frank, you mind helping me clean up later? I've got some calls to make." "Of course, man. Whatever you need." I paused at the threshold and looked back one more time. Denise stood frozen in the center of the room, tears streaming down her face, the pearl necklace glinting at her throat. Brandon had backed toward the front door, clearly desperate to escape. Our friends and family stood scattered around them like witnesses to a car accident. "Oh, and Denise," I called out, "keep the necklace. Consider it a going-away present." Then I walked outside into the cool night air and started planning the rest of my life. 3 days later, I was living in my workshop. Not literally. I still slept in the house, still showered, and ate meals there. But emotionally, spiritually, I'd moved into the converted garage behind our property where I kept my tools and worked on side projects. It was the only space that felt entirely mine anymore. Denise had tried to talk to me exactly once since the party. She'd cornered me in the kitchen the morning after, still in her bathrobe, eyes red from crying. "Joel, we need to discuss what happened." "No," I'd said, not looking up from my coffee. "We don't." "You humiliated me in front of everyone we know." That had made me laugh, a sound with no humor in it. "I humiliated you? Denise, I found you making out with another man at your own birthday party. A party I threw for you, wearing a gift I bought you. If you're humiliated, you did that to yourself." "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, and apparently it's exactly what Brandon thought too, since you told him we were separated." She'd gone quiet then, which told me everything I needed to know. No denial, no explanation that made sense. Just silence. "I'm filing for divorce," I'd said quietly. "You can stay in the house until we figure out the details, but we're done talking about this." Now, sitting in my workshop with a beer and my laptop, I was researching divorce lawyers and trying to figure out how to untangle 4 years of shared everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, the house, the cars. We'd built a life together, and now I had to dismantle it piece by piece. My phone buzzed. Text message from Frank. "How you holding up?" "Been better," I typed back. "Been worse too." "Want company? I've got beer and Chinese food." 20 minutes later, Frank was sitting on my workbench, passing me containers of lo mein and asking the questions I'd been avoiding. "So what's the plan?" he said around a mouthful of orange chicken. "Divorce. Split everything 50-50. Move on with my life." "That's not a plan. That's a grocery list. What are you actually going to do?" I set down my chopsticks and looked at him. Frank had been my friend since high school, had been the best man at my wedding, had watched me fall in love with Denise and build a life with her. If anyone deserved the truth, it was him. "I'm going to make sure she doesn't get to rewrite history," I said. "She's already started telling people it was a misunderstanding, that Brandon kissed her and she pushed him away. Stacy's been spreading that version around town." "But you have the photos." "I have the photos, and I'm going to make sure the right people see them." Frank was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "You sure about this? Once you go down that road, there's no coming back." "She made that choice for me when she asked me to leave my own house so she could cheat on me." "Fair enough." He cracked open another beer. "What do you need?" That was Frank. No judgment, no lectures about taking the high road, just practical support. "Information," I said. "I need to know how long this has been going on, who else knows, what she's been telling people, and I need to know what she's planning." "I can help with that. My cousin Lisa works at the bank downtown, same one where Denise has her personal account, and my girlfriend knows Stacy from yoga class." "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal." "Of course not, but information has a way of traveling, you know?" We spent the next hour planning what Frank generously called my fact-finding mission, and what I privately thought of as the beginning of my revenge. Because that's what this was, really. Not just a divorce, not just moving on. Denise had humiliated me publicly, had lied to me and to Brandon, had tried to have her cake and eat it too. Now she was going to learn that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Joel, this is Brandon. Brandon Mays. Can we talk?" I looked at Frank, who raised his eyebrows. I put the phone on speaker. "What do you want, Brandon?" "I want to apologize, man. I had no idea you two were still together. Denise told me you'd separated months ago, that you were just waiting for the paperwork to go through." "When did she tell you that?" "Back in March. We ran into each other at that coffee shop on Main Street, started talking. She seemed really sad, said the marriage had been over for a while, but you were both too stubborn to make it official." "March. 3 months ago. 3 months of her lying to both of us, playing us against each other." "How many times did you see her?" I asked. Brandon was quiet for a long moment. "Look, I don't want to make this worse for you." "It can't get worse. How many times?" "Maybe 10, 12. We'd meet for coffee or lunch. She said she needed a friend who understood what she was going through." "And the other night was the first time you kissed her?" "God, no. We'd been together a few times. I thought she was single, Joel. I swear to you I thought she was single." I closed my eyes. "A few times. Months of this. Not just one moment of weakness." "Where?" I asked. "What? Where did you sleep with my wife?" Frank made a cutting motion across his throat, telling me to stop, but I needed to know. I needed to understand the full scope of what she'd done. "My place," Brandon said quietly. "Always my place. She said it would be too weird at her house with all your stuff still there." My stuff? Like I was already a ghost in my own home. "Joel, I'm really sorry. If I'd known..." "You would have what? Not slept with her? Or just been more careful about it?" "I wouldn't have touched her. I'm not that guy." Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just another victim of Denise's lies. But I was too angry to care about his feelings right now. "Stay away from my wife," I said. "Stay away from my house. And if you see her again, you tell her that her husband knows everything now." I hung up and threw the phone onto my workbench. "Months," I said to Frank. "This has been going on for months. I'm sorry, brother." She looked me in the eye every day for months and lied to me, made me feel crazy for being suspicious, made me think I was being paranoid and jealous. "What are you going to do?" I stood up and walked to the window that looked out toward the house. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see Denise moving around inside, probably on the phone with Stacy, probably planning her next move. I'm going to make sure everyone knows who she really is, I said, starting with her job. Frank looked confused. Her job? Denise works in HR at Morrison Industries. Big company, lots of policies about employee conduct and moral character. They take that stuff seriously. You're going to get her fired? I'm going to let her get herself fired. All I'm going to do is make sure the right information reaches the right people. I turned back to Frank, and he must have seen something in my expression that worried him. Joel, think about this. You go nuclear on her. There's no walking it back. You sure you want to burn everything down? I thought about the last 4 years. The way she used to laugh at my jokes, curl up next to me on the couch during movies, defend me to her friends when they made snide comments about my blue-collar job. I thought about the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd promised to love and honor me for better or worse. Then I thought about her asking me to leave my own house so she could cheat on me with a clear conscience. She already burned it down, I said. I'm just making sure everyone can see the flames. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Morrison Industries. I didn't have a plan exactly, just a vague idea about corporate policies and moral turpitude clauses. But as I sat in the parking lot, watching employees stream into the gleaming glass building where my wife spent 40 hours a week, a better idea started forming. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found what I was looking for. Dave Morrison Jr., the owner's son and current VP of operations. We'd met at a company barbecue 2 years ago, and he'd seemed like a decent guy. More importantly, he'd seemed like the kind of guy who took his company's reputation seriously. Dave, this is Joel Carter, Denise's husband. We met at the company picnic a while back. Joel, good to hear from you. How's everything? Actually, that's why I'm calling. I need to speak with you about something sensitive, something that affects the company. There was a pause. What kind of something? The kind that's better discussed in person. Are you free for coffee this morning? An hour later, I was sitting across from Dave Morrison Jr. in a quiet corner booth at Stella's Diner, watching his face change as I laid out the situation. I want to be clear, I said, sliding the printed photos across the table. I'm not asking you to fire my wife. I'm just making sure you have all the information you need to make informed decisions about your employees. Dave studied the photos, his expression growing more troubled with each one. These were taken at a private party? At my house. At her birthday party. A party I threw for her. And this man, he's not employed by Morrison Industries? No, he's unemployed, actually. Lives off his ex-girlfriend and whatever he can make selling supplements online. Dave set the photos down and rubbed his temples. Joel, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do with it. What Denise does in her personal life? Is her business? Absolutely, unless it reflects on the company's values or creates a hostile work environment. I leaned forward. Dave, your company has a strict policy about employee conduct, right? About maintaining the integrity and reputation of Morrison Industries? Yes, but... And Denise is in HR. She's the one who enforces those policies, who makes decisions about other people's employment based on their character and judgment. I could see him starting to understand where I was going with this. She's been lying to her husband for months, I continued, conducting an affair while representing herself as separated to her lover and happily married to her colleagues. She's been using company time to coordinate meetings with this man. I have phone records showing calls and texts during work hours. And she's been violating her own department's policies about honesty and integrity. Dave was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to investigate whether your HR manager has been conducting herself in a manner consistent with the values Morrison Industries expects from its employees, particularly those in positions of trust and authority. This feels like revenge, Joel. It is revenge, but it's also the truth. And if the truth is damaging to her, that's her fault, not mine. Dave gathered up the photos and slid them back to me. I'll look into it, but I want you to know, if this turns out to be some kind of vendetta, then you'll have learned something important about my character too, and you can make decisions accordingly. I left the diner feeling lighter than I had in days. Not happy, exactly, but purposeful. For months, I'd been reacting to Denise's lies and manipulation, always one step behind, always trying to catch up to reality. Now I was taking action. My phone rang as I was driving home. Frank. How'd it go with the corporate thing? Good. What did you find out? Lisa says Denise has been moving money, small amounts but regular. transferring from the joint account to her personal savings, started about 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. Right around the time she would have been planning her birthday party, planning to invite Brandon, planning to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. How much? About $3,000 so far. Nothing that would trigger automatic alerts, but enough to build up a nest egg. She's planning to leave. Looks like it. There's more. My girlfriend talked to Stacy at yoga yesterday. Apparently Denise has been telling people you've been emotionally abusive, that she's been afraid to leave because you've threatened her. I had to pull over. The anger that hit me was so sudden and intense I couldn't see straight. Threatened her? I've never even raised my voice to her. I know that, man. Anyone who knows you knows that. But she's building a narrative. What kind of narrative? The kind where she's the victim and you're the controlling husband who drove her into another man's arms. The kind where her cheating was really just her trying to escape an abusive situation. I sat in my truck on the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel and trying to process this new level of betrayal. It wasn't enough for her to cheat on me, to lie to me, to humiliate me. Now she was going to destroy my reputation too, paint me as an abuser to justify her actions. Frank, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need you to start recording conversations. Anytime someone brings up me or Denise, anytime someone repeats her version of events, I need documentation. You thinking lawsuit? I'm thinking survival. If she's going to try to destroy me, I need to be able to defend myself. Consider it done. What else? I thought about Brandon's phone call, about the months of lies, about the money she'd been hiding and the stories she'd been spreading. I need to know where she's been meeting him. I need dates, times, places, and I need to know who else knows about this. Joel, you sure you want to go down this road? This is starting to feel like... Like what? Like you're planning something big. He was right. I was planning something big. Because Denise had made one crucial mistake in her campaign to destroy me. She'd underestimated how smart I was, how determined I could be, and how many friends I had who'd be willing to help me fight back. She wants to play games, I said. Let's play games. 2 weeks later, I had everything I needed. Frank's network of informants had been more effective than I'd hoped. His cousin Lisa had provided a detailed record of Denise's financial activities. His girlfriend had documented every lie Stacy spread at yoga class. His buddy who worked at the phone company had given me records showing the frequency and timing of calls between Denise and Brandon. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Peterson, my elderly neighbor who'd apparently been watching my house with the dedication of a Cold War spy. Joel, dear, she'd said, cornering me while I was checking my mailbox. Oiki Manam, I hope you don't mind, but I've been keeping track of that man who's been visiting your wife. She handed me a small notebook filled with dates, times, and license plate numbers. 3 months of documentation, recorded with the precision of a court stenographer. I knew something wasn't right, she said, patting my arm. A woman doesn't entertain male visitors when her husband's at work unless she's up to no good. According to Mrs. Peterson's records, Brandon had been to my house 17 times while I was at work, always between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., always staying for 2 to 3 hours. The most recent visit had been yesterday. Yesterday, while I'd been installing kitchen cabinets across town, my wife had been sleeping with her ex-boyfriend in our bed. I'd reached my breaking point. That evening, I waited until Denise got home from work, then asked her to sit down at the kitchen table. We need to talk, I said. She looked nervous, which told me she knew this conversation was coming. Okay. I spread Mrs. Peterson's notebook across the table, along with printouts of the phone records and bank statements. Her face went white as she recognized what she was looking at. 17 times, I said quietly. He's been to our house 17 times in the last 3 months, always when I'm at work, always for hours at a time. Joel, I can explain. You've transferred $3,000 from our joint account to your personal savings. Money I earned, money from our shared life, money you've been hiding from me. You've been telling people I'm abusive, that I've threatened you, that I've been controlling and manipulative. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. And yesterday, while I was working a 12-hour shift to pay for this house, you brought Brandon here and slept with him in our bed. How do you? She stopped herself, but it was too late. How do I know? Because I'm not stupid, Denise. Because I have eyes and ears and friends who care about me. Because you've been lying so much you can't keep your story straight anymore. I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. She looked smaller somehow, deflated. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to pack a bag and you're going to leave. Tonight. You can stay with Stacy or Brandon or whoever else you've been confiding in, but you're not staying here. You can't kick me out of my own house. Watch me. This house is in my name. I bought it before we got married, and I've been making the payments ever since. Legally, you're a guest here, and I'm asking you to leave. Joel, please, can't we work this out? Can't we try counseling or... Counseling? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. You want to go to counseling to work on our marriage while you're sleeping with another man? I'll end it with Brandon. I'll cut off all contact. We can start over. For a moment, I almost believed she meant it. There was something in her voice, something desperate and genuine that reminded me of the woman I'd married. But then I thought about the lies, the months of deception, the way she'd asked me to leave my own house so she could cheat on me with a clear conscience. It's too late, I said. I don't love you anymore, Denise. I don't trust you, I don't respect you, and I don't want to be married to you. She started crying then. Real tears that might have moved me a week ago. Now they just made me tired. Pack a bag, I said again. I'll give you an hour. She went upstairs, and I heard her moving around in our bedroom, opening drawers and closets. When she came back down, she was carrying a small suitcase and wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her. Joel, take it off. What? The necklace. Take it off. You said I could keep it. That was before I knew you'd been wearing it while you cheated on me. Take it off. She reached up with shaking hands and unclasped the necklace, setting it on the kitchen table between us. I loved you, she said quietly. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of being married, the security, the respectability, but you didn't love me. If you'd loved me, you wouldn't have done this. She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the front door, then turned back one last time. You'll regret this, she said. When you're alone and bitter and angry, you'll regret throwing away 4 years for one mistake. One mistake? I stood up and walked toward her. Denise, this wasn't one mistake. This was months of deliberate choices. This was planning and lying and manipulation. This was you deciding that your happiness was more important than our marriage, more important than my feelings, more important than basic human decency. I opened the front door and held it for her. The only thing I regret, I said, is not seeing who you really were sooner. She walked out into the night, and I closed the door behind her. Then I went to the kitchen, picked up the pearl necklace, and threw it in the trash. For the first time in months, my house felt like home. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Denise had been suspended from her job pending an investigation into conduct unbecoming an employee of Morrison Industries. By the following Monday, she was unemployed. Dave Morrison Jr. called me personally to let me know. We conducted a thorough investigation, he said. Phone records, computer usage, interviews with colleagues. She was conducting personal business on company time, using company resources to facilitate an extramarital affair, and creating a hostile work environment through her dishonesty. What was the final straw? She lied to our investigator, claimed she'd never used company phones or computers for personal calls or emails. We showed her the evidence, and she doubled down on the lie. At that point, we had no choice. I felt a surge of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity, not just because she'd been fired, but because she'd been fired for the same character flaws that had destroyed our marriage: dishonesty, selfishness, and an inability to take responsibility for her actions. Dave, I want you to know I appreciate how thoroughly you handled this. Joel, can I ask you something? Are you okay? I mean, really okay? This has been a hell of a few weeks for you. I thought about it. Was I okay? My marriage was over, my wife had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and I'd spent the last month systematically destroying her life in return. I'm better than okay, I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in months, I feel like myself again. That evening, Frank came over with pizza and beer to celebrate what he called my liberation. So what's next? He asked, settling onto my couch with a slice of pepperoni. Next, I finish what she started. Meaning? I pulled out my phone and showed him a series of text messages I'd received throughout the day. Messages from friends, colleagues, acquaintances, all of them offering support, expressing outrage at Denise's behavior, sharing their own stories of suspicions they'd had but hadn't wanted to voice. Meaning I make sure everyone knows the truth. Not my version of the truth, not a spin or a narrative. Just the facts. You're going to go public? I'm going to stop hiding. She's been controlling the narrative for weeks, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. Time to set the record straight. I'd already started. Earlier that day, I'd posted a simple status update on social media. For those asking about my marriage, Denise and I are divorcing. She's been having an affair for months. I have documentation. I'm doing fine. Within hours, I'd received dozens of comments and private messages. Some offered sympathy, others shared their own experiences with infidelity, and a few provided information I hadn't known about Denise's behavior over the past few months. Apparently, I hadn't been the only one she'd been lying to. "Joel," Frank said carefully, "you sure you want to do this? Once you put it all out there, you can't take it back. She made that choice for me when she decided to cheat. I'm just making sure the consequences land where they belong." My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "This is Stacy. We need to talk." I showed the message to Frank, who raised his eyebrows. "You going to respond?" "Oh, absolutely." I typed back, "Talk about what?" "About what you're doing to Denise, about the lies you're spreading." "I haven't told any lies. Everything I've shared is documented fact. You're destroying her life over one mistake. One mistake that lasted 3 months and involved 17 visits to my house while I was at work. One mistake that included lying to me, lying to him, stealing money from our joint account, and trying to paint me as abusive to justify her behavior." There was a long pause before her next message. "She's staying with me. She's devastated. She lost her job. She's getting divorced. And now everyone in town is talking about her. Good. Actions have consequences. You're being cruel." I stared at that message for a long moment, feeling the anger rise in my chest. "Cruel? You want to know what's cruel, Stacy? Cruel is asking your husband to leave his own house so you can cheat on him. Cruel is lying to someone for months while you sleep with their wife. Cruel is trying to destroy someone's reputation to cover up your own bad behavior. She made a mistake. She made a choice. Every day for months, she chose to lie to me. She chose to betray our marriage. She chose to humiliate me in front of everyone we know, and you chose to help her do it. I was being a good friend. You were being an enabler. You invited Brandon to that party knowing what would happen. You've been spreading lies about me being abusive. You've been helping her hide money and plan her exit strategy." Another long pause. "What do you want from her?" "Nothing. I want nothing from her. I want her out of my life completely." "Then why are you doing this? Why are you trying to destroy her?" I looked at Frank, who was watching me with concern. He mouthed the words, "Be careful." "I'm not trying to destroy her," I typed. "I'm just making sure the truth is known. If the truth is destructive to her, that's her problem. Please, Joel, she's sorry. She knows she messed up. Can't you just let it go?" Let it go, like it was a minor disagreement, a small misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with an apology. "Tell Denise something for me," I wrote. "Tell her that sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo months of lies. Sorry doesn't restore trust or respect or love. Sorry is just a word people use when they get caught. You're going to regret this someday. The only thing I regret is not seeing who she really was sooner. And Stacy, lose my number. We're not friends anymore." I blocked her contact and set my phone aside. "Feel better?" Frank asked. "Actually, yeah, I do." And I did. For months, I'd been the victim in this story, the one being lied to and manipulated and betrayed. Now I was taking control, fighting back, making sure that the person who'd caused all this damage was the one who paid the price for it. It felt like justice. It felt like victory. And I was just getting started. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Thursday in November, exactly 6 months after Denise's birthday party. I sat in the courthouse hallway afterward, holding the papers that officially ended my marriage, feeling oddly empty. It was over. 4 years of marriage, 8 months of lies, and 2 months of warfare, all reduced to a legal document that divided our assets and declared us strangers again. Denise had tried one last manipulation at the final hearing. She'd shown up with a lawyer and a story about emotional abuse, about being driven into another man's arms by my controlling behavior. She'd even brought Stacy as a character witness. It hadn't worked. The evidence was too overwhelming, too well documented. Phone records, bank statements, witness testimony, photographs. Everything painted a clear picture of a woman who'd planned and executed a months-long affair while systematically lying to everyone involved. The judge had been particularly unimpressed with her claim that transferring money to a secret account was financial planning rather than preparation for abandoning the marriage. In the end, she'd walked away with her personal belongings and half the value of our shared assets, minus the $3,000 she'd hidden, which the judge had awarded to me as compensation for her financial misconduct. I'd kept the house, the truck, and my dignity. Now, sitting in my truck outside the courthouse, I called Frank to let him know it was over. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," I said, and meant it. "What's next?" "Next, I get on with my life. I've got a business to run, a house to enjoy, and a future to build." "Any regrets?" I thought about that. Did I regret the way I'd handled things? The systematic destruction of Denise's reputation and career? The cold, calculated way I'd exposed every lie and betrayal? No, I said finally. She made her choices and I made mine. She chose to lie and cheat and try to destroy me. I chose to fight back. Good for you, brother. You want to grab dinner tonight? Celebrate your freedom? Actually, I think I want to go home and just be alone in my house. My house with no lies, no secrets, no one plotting behind my back. I get it. But Joel, don't stay alone too long, okay? Don't let this make you bitter. I'm not bitter, I said. I'm just careful now. I know what betrayal looks like. I know what lies sound like. I'll never be that naive again. I drove home through the November rain, past the coffee shop where Denise had first reconnected with Brandon, past Morrison Industries where she used to work, past the bar where Frank and I had planned my counterattack. Everything looked different now, smaller somehow, less important. When I got home, I found an envelope on my front porch. No return address, just my name written in Denise's handwriting. Inside was a letter, 3 pages of her careful script. Joel, it began. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say this. I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices and told horrible lies. I know I destroyed something good and pure and real. I almost threw it away without reading the rest, but something made me continue. I want you to know that I loved you. I really did. But I was scared and confused and selfish, and I convinced myself that I deserved more than what we had. I convinced myself that you didn't really see me, didn't really appreciate me. I was wrong. Brandon was never about love. He was about feeling young again, feeling desired, feeling like I was still the person I used to be before I became a wife and a responsible adult. It was stupid and destructive, and I regret it every day. I know you'll never forgive me. I know you think I'm a terrible person. Maybe you're right. But I wanted you to know that losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Not losing my job, not the gossip, not the shame, losing you. I hope someday you'll find someone who deserves you. Someone who sees how good and loyal and strong you are. Someone who won't be stupid enough to throw away your love. I'm sorry, Joel, for everything. It was signed simply Denise. I read it twice, then walked to the kitchen and threw it in the trash. Sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't undo months of betrayal. Sorry was just a word people used when they finally had to face the consequences of their choices. But as I stood in my kitchen, in my house, in my life that was finally completely my own again, I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had sustained me through months of planning and fighting and revenge had burned itself out, leaving behind something cleaner and calmer. I was done with Denise. Done with the lies, the betrayal, the drama. Done with letting her choices define my life. I pulled out my phone and deleted her contact information, blocked her on social media, erased the last digital traces of our relationship. Then I opened a beer, sat on my couch, and started planning the rest of my life. A life without lies, without betrayal, without someone who could look me in the eye and promise to love me while planning to destroy me. A life that was entirely, completely, finally my own. 6 months later, I ran into Brandon at the hardware store. He looked older, tired, like someone who'd learned hard lessons about the difference between fantasy and reality. Joel, he said quietly, how are you doing? Good, I said, and meant it. Really good. I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry it worked out that way. I'm not, he nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about my part in all of it. I really didn't know you were still together. I know, she lied to both of us. Yeah, she did. He was quiet for a moment. You know she moved away, right? Left town about a month ago. I hadn't known, but I wasn't surprised. There wasn't much left for her here. Good for her, I said. I hope she finds whatever she's looking for. And I meant that too. Not because I'd forgiven her, but because her happiness or unhappiness was no longer my concern. She was just someone I used to know, someone who'd taught me important lessons about trust and betrayal and the price of naivety. Someone who'd made me stronger by breaking me down. Brandon nodded and walked away, and I finished my shopping and went home to my house, my life, my future that belonged entirely to me. That evening, I got a text from a woman named Sarah who worked at the bank downtown. Frank had introduced us a few weeks earlier, and we'd been talking, getting to know each other. Dinner tomorrow, she wrote. I promise to pay for my own meal and not ask you to leave so I can meet my ex. I laughed out loud. Sarah knew my story. Everyone in town knew my story by now. And she had a way of making light of it without diminishing it. It's a date, I wrote back, and for the first time in over a year, I meant that in the best possible way. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Mrs. Peterson holding a casserole dish. I made too much lasagna, she said, which we both knew was a lie. Thought you might like some. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. That's very kind. You're looking well, Joel. Happy. I am happy. Good. You deserve it, she patted my arm. That woman never deserved you anyway. Too selfish, too entitled. I could see it from the beginning. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened? She was right. I wouldn't have. I'd been too in love, too committed to the idea of our marriage to see the warning signs that had been there all along. Well, I said, I'm listening now. Good boy. Trust your instincts. They're better than you think. She walked back to her house, and I closed the door, holding her lasagna and thinking about instincts, about trust, about the difference between love and obsession. I'd learned a lot in the past year, about myself, about relationships, about the importance of self-respect and boundaries. Hard lessons, expensive lessons, but valuable ones. And now, finally, I was ready to use what I'd learned to build something better, something real, something that would last.